it's going to be harder for the technician to walk around with their chin up and say, I know everything, right? Because, let's face it, nobody does. And as we advance more and more and more with the technology that's coming out, I think they would be a bit naive to not see that, right?
Hello and welcome everyone to another special episode of the Auto Tech Show. Today recording high above the show floor here in Las Vegas, Nevada at the SEMA 2024 Auto Show. And on this episode, we are tackling a topic that continues to come into many conversations, certainly here at the show, but in online sources and articles around the world. Of course, we're talking about the gap between our technicians and emerging technology, specifically today, looking at technology behind live support in 2024 and how this can have a massive impact and assist in complex repairs and services. And to do this, I'm happy to welcome onto the Auto Tech Show, Brandon Matthews, technical professional at Opus IVS. Brandon and his team at Opus IVS work to help shops repair complex vehicles fast with automotive diagnostic tools, programming, and live repair guidance. Some really great technical solutions on display within their products, so be sure to check them out after the show. Of course, we'll put links down below in the podcast notes. But jumping straight in, Brandon, thank you so much for your time today. I know it's a hectic few days, I think, to say the least, at the show here, but appreciate the time that you can lend to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Definitely hectic, a lot going on here, but fun nonetheless.
Fun nonetheless. How are you finding things? We're a couple days in now. Are you seeing what you expected to see? Are you seeing different things?
I've been to SEMA a few times, and it's definitely what I expect. Always a good time, a lot going on, a lot to soak in, a lot of cool new products to check out, and awesome booths, and just a very good presentation overall.
Yeah, overall, I mean, there's everything and anything here. It's really cool to see kind of what's coming next. Everyone likes to show off the next bits of technology, from hardware to software to vehicles and everything going on in between. Based on what you've seen over the last years, are things advancing tech-wise as you've expected them to?
Absolutely. I, for one, have absolutely expected a very fast and exponential advancement in technology. We have things like electrification with EVs and hybrids. We have ADAS systems, not to mention just general tech advancements with infotainment systems and all of the functions and features that the new cars are coming with. So things are definitely progressing rapidly. I did, however, expect that. So good to prepare yourself.
Good to prepare yourself and be part of the conversation. It just addresses the importance of coming to shows like this. So
absolutely.
You touched on a few elements that I want to jump right into and start our conversations there. Vehicles are getting increasingly complex. I think the level of technology, the fuel systems, the software inside the car, essentially smartphones with wheels these days, that old oil change and brake job is no longer the minimum you need to require on these cars anymore. With the complexity that we're seeing, how does that change the nature of the repair and service industry?
I think it changes it greatly in that, a lot more training and education is needed on the technician side to be able to keep up with those advancements, as well as we're going to see a larger gap between the engineers and the technicians, and bridging that gap is where Opus tries to come in, further train up the technicians and fill in some of those dead spots with live remote technical support or an AI technician bot, etc. But as a whole, that gap is widening, so it needs to be addressed.
And is it widening just because of the complexity, and is that why we're seeing that gap grow maybe more than we expected to? Is it just the rapid advancement in technology is so much more fast?
I think that's definitely the biggest factor. I think there's also what I would consider to be a fundamental issue with the amount of training that new technicians get right out of the gate, right? In a lot of other countries, the process to becoming a technician is way more advanced and longer. More training is involved, more education is involved out of the gate. So I think that we could improve in that area as well. But that coupled with the technological advancements is hitting this industry hard.
Do you think that rapid sort of wanting to get the techs on the floor as fast as possible, do you think that's maybe partly, and a big topic last year we saw at the show was the staffing issue, and it still remains an issue. Still after the whole COVID pandemic, we just saw such a drop. We're going to see people retire in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be even more of an issue. Does that also propel this operators and service providers just want to get people on the floor as fast as possible, and maybe that leads to a bit of that education gap?
I think that's a great question, and my answer would be I think that has to play a role, right?
Yeah.
If you're a shop owner, if you're a shop foreman, and you need bodies, right? You need somebody there to do the physical work. So a body, whether it's someone that's not necessarily as trained as they could or should be, is better than no body, right?
Yeah.
Play on words.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right? They need to fill the seats, so to speak, right? Somebody has to do the physical work. So I think that absolutely has to play a role.
And I guess it gets a little bit more worrisome when we look at the complexity of the vehicles, having people on the floor maybe not as educated when they're dealing with complex electrical systems. Now it becomes a dangerous environment for them.
And that's a great point, right? So as the complexity increases and as we move towards electrification and high voltage levels, the safety factor becomes more and more evident, right? So training, proper education, proper safety training is going to be crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that point, I wanted to bring up the real time and the remote support aspect that I know you guys do a lot of work in. It's something that you're really close to. So I wanted to kind of touch on that as well. How does this help the common technician and maybe these lesser trained technicians or any service center around the world or the US? How does that real-time aspect lend a hand to these complex services?
So what we do at Opus and what we do a great job of is connecting the technician that is on the end user side to a technician that is brand and vehicle specific, that has many years of experience in that particular brand or in that particular field. I spent 11 years working on specifically BMW and Rolls-Royce before coming into the organization. So when you have a shop that maybe specializes in all European vehicles or a general shop that does all makes, all models, not only are they dealing with the advancements in technology, but they're also dealing with a wide net of different systems and components throughout multiple manufacturers. And it's nearly impossible to be a master in everything, right? So it's really about connecting the right people, right? Connecting a technician that maybe does not work on a lot of BMWs with a BMW master technician, right? Not only connecting them, but then also providing them with guidance and training in that support call. So we try not to just give them the answer, because the answer may not be there just yet, but to train them and educate them and get to the answer together through essentially a mini training session in a support call, right? So not only are we assisting them troubleshooting an issue, but they're learning in the process.
Definitely sounds like an assist that's needed, especially when we look at what we just discussed, that gap that's growing. It sounds like this is that bridge that's going to help us get to that point where we're not going to have these gaps and vehicles don't have to worry about complexities because there's going to be experts to help them along the way. Do you feel like it's an essential step forward?
I absolutely do. Nobody, like I said, nobody can be a master at everything. And a lot of it also is dependent upon informational resources that the technician or the shop may have available to them. So when you get an organization like Opus, which has a lot of OE agreements or OE service information, and we're able to bridge that to the technical, to a technician or a workshop, right? That assists in bridging that gap, as well as simply providing guidance with things that may be common to one technician, but a different technician is unfamiliar with entirely, right? So again, let's say we have a workshop that primarily works on European vehicles and they happen to get in the occasional Chevrolet or Ford, right? And they're just not familiar with that platform, right? Mm-hmm. That, in addition to the technological advancements, is going to make it challenging for that workshop. They may not even have the information or the knowledge on knowing where to find the information, right? That guidance alone, what are the various OE applications that they can utilize, what service resources are available to them for that particular manufacturer, brand, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. It seems like it would just cause problems more and more. And then it just affects that service center's trust with that customer. And if that's not serviced properly and you're dealing with a high-end car, you've dealt with, like you mentioned, BMW and Rolls-Royce, two prominent names.
Yeah.
If a customer of that stature comes in and doesn't get their car serviced properly because the tech simply doesn't know what they're doing, that affects that service center's reputation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a huge factor. In addition to, let's say it's a workshop that works on one specific brand, they're still going to run into oddball situations where, they need guidance, right? And getting a second opinion or being able to rely on a live support agent to guide them through a troubleshooting event or a programming event or a coding event or on a new model that they haven't seen because it's fresh out of warranty or something like that, right? Not only do you have the technological gap with a lot of the independent workshops, you have a model year gap in that the dealerships are seeing those vehicles for the first few years while those cars are under warranty, and that technology necessarily hasn't filtered down to the independent aftermarket just yet.
Really interesting. It's so much more complex than I thought. That's a good example. Do you have any particular, maybe a customer or a case study that comes to mind where you've really seen this be a shining light, like a real success?
Regularly. I mean, I could probably think of, 2-3 case studies from every day being on the technical line, whereas I've been able to guide someone or help them determine or troubleshoot an issue that to them may have taken 10 hours without guidance, but it's something that I just happened to see. And, I was able to assist them with troubleshooting, and boom, we get to the bottom of the problem, almost immediately. For example, I recently had, I think it was a 2017 X5 BMW, and the workshop had scanned the car, and there was no communication to the engine control unit, the transmission control unit, and the transfer case control unit, right? And for an experienced BMW technician, those three in particular tell me something right away, right? Whereas to somebody that's not familiar with that brand or hadn't seen that particular issue yet, to them, that's just 3 modules not communicating.
Interesting.
And they need to go through all of the various testing. We need to check powers, we need to check earths, we need to check communication data lines, etc. Me servicing BMWs many times in the past, okay, these 3 modules are all on the same data network. However, there are other modules on that data network that are communicating, so I know the entire network's not downed. What do these 3 particular modules have in common that all the others on that particular powertrain network don't have in common? Well, those modules are all fitted external to the vehicle cabin, which means they're going to share one ground, right? So I led that technician right to the earth strap off of the engine mount, and boom, that thing is corroded or broken. Problem solved.
And that's just experience. That's just you having dealt with this for many, many years. And that's sort of that benefit of having that expert help someone who maybe knows a lot of stuff and is an experienced tech, but hasn't dealt with that particular issue before.
Absolutely. And whether or not they're working on just that brand or they're working on all brands, right? You do, as much as we don't want to rely on pattern failures, they exist. So if you couple that with testing, troubleshooting, logical thinking, you'll always get to the bottom of the problem, right?
Yeah.
But having somebody to rely on as a partner in the field, right? Because that's what we really pride ourselves on and how we view ourselves. We want to partner with these workshops, right? We don't want the customer business relationship. We want a partnering relationship, whereas you receive assistance in every possible way, right? Whether it's service information or repair guidance or training, et cetera, right?
It's really interesting. Something that came to mind while you were giving that example is, I guess, mindset and willingness to accept this type of help. Technicians are traditionally very proud. I know how to do this, leave me alone. Do you find in the conversations with techs that they're accepting of this help, or is there a bit of resistance still?
It depends. There's definitely a lot of type A personalities as technicians, right? But I think that most of them can be humble enough that they know not everyone knows everything, right? I've been in the BMW field for a long time and I'm still learning every day. at some point, the technician will always humble themselves and there'll be a breakthrough, right? Sometimes there can be a little resistance up front, but you'll also find that once they partner with us and once we help them fix one car,
the trust
then
is established.
boom, you've built a relationship, you've built a rapport with that organization. And whereas they may have been hesitant at first, now they're like, hey, Brandon, good talking to you again. Yeah. All of a sudden, the entire dynamic changes, and now they just want your input, right? They may even want it when they know the problem already, but they want that extra reassurance or that extra, hey, you're on the right track.
Just so that confidence builder. So it really is establishing trust by just doing.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's going to get easier as we see this sort of new generation come in, that they're a bit more accepting of help.
I think that's absolutely true, especially as we move towards electrification and EVs and hydrogen cars. It's going to be harder for the technician to walk around with their chin up and say, I know everything, right? Because, let's face it, nobody does. And as we advance more and more and more with the technology that's coming out, I think they would be a bit naive to not see that, right?
Yeah, and I think that's just that acceptance, and hopefully that sort of proud type A learns to accept as we go on, and we don't have this gap continue to grow, and we start to bring it back together. I think that's ultimately what your goal is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the intent.
So one of the interesting things I found while doing research for this episode is that convergence between real-time support, as we're talking about, and the diagnostic data that technicians now have available to. It used to just be plug in the car and you get a little bit of data, but now you have so much more diagnostic data that can come from vehicles, connecting all the different parts and pieces together. And as you mentioned, just with that example, can you just speak a little bit to these two areas converging and how important having them converge is?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right? When OBD2 first came out, right, and you could pull very little data out of the car, sure, you could get a trouble code, but looking at live data PIDs, there was some there, and there was a lot you wish were there that weren't there, right? Luckily, vehicle manufacturers are providing more and more data, right? If you couple that with the use of oscilloscopes and further advancements of tools and equipment, right, now we can really leverage that data to try and troubleshoot the car. And that's another area where I think having a partner in the field like Opus really opens some doors as well, because we're not just a vehicle technical support, right? We'll guide you in using tools and equipment and, again, training and teaching you how the system works, et cetera, right? So if you leverage that, plus the ability to remotely access a scan tool and help that technician look at the data in live time.
You're seeing what they see.
You're seeing what they see. You're maybe a little more familiar with what you're looking for and what good looks like versus what bad looks like.
Yeah, going through all that data, you kind of know what line to go to see.
Absolutely. So
super interesting.
I think that's a great thing, and I think it's necessary, right? Without data, we would be in big trouble.
Totally. And I think another topic here is, of course, the reliability and the accuracy of the data that comes through. You know what the truths are, and you can help to assist with that a little bit more. We're seeing cars really become this software-defined vehicle, right? It's software first, hardware second. Plugging in, you're going to get pages of things, whereas before, as you mentioned, it was just an error code, and you plug in to get the definition of that error code, and then trust the tech to know what the heck to do with all that. But now it's really kind of much more, it's like a computer diagnostic tool versus just a code reader.
Absolutely. Not only that, you're seeing the actual faults become more defined as well, right? Whereas you used to get a 4-digit P code with no suffix, right? Now you're getting a suffix and even more definition right in the fault description. So data is huge and crucially important. And I think you hit the head of the nail when you said that these cars are really becoming computers on wheels. I think I read an article maybe a year or so ago about the new S-Class that had been released. And, the technical editor had written something like that vehicle had over 60 million lines of software code throughout all of its modules, right? And then people wonder why you can sometimes fix a car with a software update alone, right?
Which is actually crazy to think about. And as soon as like we started to see these over-the-air software updates come to vehicles, my new car has a software over-the-air update system, and it blows my mind. It's my first vehicle that I ever had that does that, where maybe there's a glitch in a thing and there's a new patch code, and I just hit update and the car does a thing. I don't have to bring it anywhere. It's incredible. But the fact that software can fix an issue, that's insane. And that adds even another level of complexity to the service side.
It does. And the stuff that the engineers can do with software is amazing, right? A very short story, but an example of that. There was an older M5 model, an S85 engine, where they had throttle actuator issues, and there was a plastic gear inside the actuator that would wear out. Right? Well, that plastic gear had a long range, but it would sit in one particular spot for a lot of its time, and that particular spot would wear out. Through the use of software, they were able to change the range of that throttle actuator plastic gear so that it sat in a different spot for more of the time. So even though the part was physically worn out, they were able to, with software, extend the service life of that component by changing the angle of that gear's operating range.
That's unreal. Right? It's like taking something from a 1.0 to a 2.0.
It is.
Totally evolving the hardware based on the That's incredible. That changes servicing and yeah, as you said, that service life cycle tremendously.
It's mind-boggling sometimes. Right?
Crazy. So kind of thinking along that lines, looking to the future, this is incredible to hear. I mean, the fact that this is an older example even, but that sounds like kind of maybe where we're headed. Looking to the future advancement then and the integration of this expert guidance, how is this going to shape the industry in the next few years? What are you excited to see when we look at this expert guidance mixed with the different tools and the complexities coming into it? What do you foresee that sort of a part of the industry evolving into?
I don't think it's going to be possible to stay in an independent workshop that isn't going to be outsourcing to dealerships without having a technical partner in the field with Opus, simply because that knowledge gap, again, between the engineering side and the technician side is growing at a vast rate, not to mention the amount of service information and technical bulletins and software updates and just the pure amount of data alone is going to be overwhelming for a lot of organizations. So just organizing that data and knowing where to access it, how to get to it, what to utilize, what software works with what vehicle. The older vehicles aren't going away. The manufacturers still have to support those older vehicles to some degree, right? So new tools are going to come out, new interfaces, new software platforms, and the old ones aren't going to go away either, right?
It's going to continue to be that coexistence of both, but progressively get more complex.
Not to mention, I mean, just look at how many models of vehicles there are now. Right? 20 years ago, you had like a BMW 3 Series, 5 Series, an M3, and an X5, maybe one or two other.
The tip of the iceberg now, isn't it?
Now you have like 35 models of BMW
with
alone.
submodels on each, right? Special editions and touring packages and sport packages and I packages and everything. Yeah. It's true. You think of the olden days were easy when you had just like 1, 2, and 3. As you said, BMW, Mercedes had the same thing. Audi had the same thing. Now it's just extra versions of each, all with their own upgrade packages, service life cycles, pieces and bits that are all different, essentially.
And I remember back in the day when companies like Bentley or other companies could write service manuals for each model. I mean, just imagine that undertaking now, right?
I remember buying a book, like a service book, and it was like a hard book where you had everything you could service your vehicle with my first cars.
You would need, 100 pages for one model of vehicle, right?
Plus
Let
one
alone
update
30.
and it renders half that book.
Yeah.
Obsolete.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable. Well, it sounds really exciting. I mean, I really enjoyed doing the research for this project, seeing what you guys did. It's one of the parts of the industry that I didn't really know existed, because unless you know about it, it's you take your car in for servicing, you don't know what happens behind that door, and as long as you get your car back, you're happy. But I had no idea this part of the industry exists, and I think it's super interesting. And it's hopefully listeners picked up a little bit on it today and something to look into, but it's really, really cool. And I wish you guys the best of luck with what you're doing and the conversations you're having here at the show. Brandon, thank you so much for today. It was really, really great talking to you. Anything that you wanted to just mention, anything that we may have missed topic-wise, or are you feeling pretty confident?
I feel like we've covered a great deal. I mean, it was awesome to be here, and thank you for having me. I'm definitely excited for the automotive future. I mean, just the interest alone, and I'm kind of a tech geek, so software and electrification, that kind of stuff, makes me grin. Cool. So yeah,
well, it's a place to be for it. This is one heck of a show to see all that kind of stuff. It's fun to watch, and I'll definitely, like I said, hopefully the audience grabbed a little bit of what you said today, and definitely gives you guys a look up, and that side of the industry maybe learns a little bit more about that real-time assist.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, Brandon.
Got it.
And for everyone watching and listening, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of the Auto Tech Show. Again, recording high above the show floor here in Las Vegas at SEMA. Lots to take away there. Big thank you to Opus IVS and Brandon for being on the show today. Hopefully you took a little bit away as well. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, head down to the podcast notes. You'll see a few different links there, obviously, for Opus IVS. Check out what they're doing, as I mentioned in that introduction. I'll also put LinkedIn links there. You can get in touch, ask questions. You never know where that's going to lead in future conversations here on the show. So with that, we'll bring this episode to a close. Another episode from SEMA coming very soon. But for now, I wish you all a great day wherever in the world you may be. I'll talk to you soon.